What is up, everybody? Welcome into Shout on this beautiful Wednesday in Western New York, where the snow is just starting. It's supposed to come down a little bit over the next 24 hours. It's that time of year. He's Ryan Talbot. I am Matt Parrino. This is the staple episode of Shout, a Buffalo Bills football podcast, brought to you by Tops Friendly Markets. 'Tis the season to save on groceries and all of your holiday gifts. Christmas bonus is underway at Tops. Shop and save $10 at all your other favorite stores and restaurants. With over 25 gift cards to choose from, there's something for everyone on your list. And don't forget to treat yourself to some extra savings too. Some great gifts like toys and games from GameStop or Toys R Us at Macy's, things for your home from Lowe's, that new big screen TV you want from Best Buy, and so much more just by shopping at Tops. Be Santa's biggest little helper with Christmas bonus from Tops. Ryan Talbot, how are you, buddy?
I am doing great, Matt. Excited to dig into the staple show. Our Wednesday staple show is here and cannot wait to get into it.
We got a lot to talk about, and nothing more pressing than the latest swerve in the Kaiir Elam career arc, which is it's been unbelievable to watch it. I mean, Ryan, we're like 3 months removed from the energy around Elam seeming to shift, right? Like they move on from John Butler in the offseason. They bring in Jamil Adai, who in a lot of ways felt like a piece specifically brought in for Kaiir Elam. And Elam comes out and has a really solid training camp, puts himself in a position, unfortunately, behind Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford, two of the best cornerbacks or one of the best duos in the league. Just not a role for him. He played against Miami in week 9, thought he was fine. Nothing jumped off the tape at you. But now we're a couple weeks later, and since then, he's been inactive the last 3 games, hasn't gotten a jersey. Jamarcus Ingram has been up. And when we talked about it on the show, it's like it makes sense. Ingram plays special teams. He can play multiple roles. So he can play the boundary, he can play the slot, he can play that third safety in the dime package. But today when Sean McDermott, I asked him about what's been going on with Kaiir Elam, and he said, listen, everything is earned and everything's going to be continued to be earned. And I said, well, is Elam not earning it? And he said, maybe other guys are earning it over him. So we're now sitting here at a place with Rasul Douglas dealing with a knee injury. He didn't practice today. His status for Sunday against the Lions in question. And I got to thinking, is this just maybe the point of no return for Kaiir Elam, who, by the way, was in the field house for almost the majority of the open period after practice where the media gets to interview players, working on the field still with Christian Benford. So maybe he does shift into the starting role and he does play on Sunday. We'll wait and see on that. But if it ends up being Ingram and he can't even get on the field over an undrafted rookie free agent from 2022, is it just time to move on?
After the season, absolutely, if that's the case. I mean, you need the bodies in season. I don't know what they would have waiting in the wings there, and I know that they're very resistant potentially to playing him. We've talked, though, like you said, the last few weeks he's been inactive because he doesn't do the special teams role where, Ingram can do that, and you have guys like Cam Lewis that are versatile pieces, but when Sean McDermott comes out and says, well, maybe that to your follow-up about, is there something he has done to not earn that job? It says a lot, even though it's just like 3 words and part of that quote. Usually McDermott is very vague in his responses. So it's a very telling quote. And, we've talked about this so many times with Kaiir Elam. He had such a good summer. But we talked about how at the time he was not a good fit when they drafted him for the system. The Bills desperately needed a cornerback. It was their biggest need going into that draft. The Chiefs leapfrog over them, take the guy that we think that they coveted. And then the Bills still went cornerback in round 1. And I understood it at the time. I liked the traits of Kaiir Elam. You thought you could coach him into playing more of a zone role. But the baffling part about that is when you really look back on it, Matt, is how many free agents at the end of their careers, how many UDFAs, guys off the street, has Sean McDermott been able to bring in here and play sizable roles at the cornerback position? You can go to Josh Norman. You can go to Dane Jackson. You can go to Nickel Roby Coleman. The list goes on and on and on of these guys that he's brought in that they have found that obviously Christian Benford, a day 3 pick who's been a star in the system. They've been able to find guys, and yet it almost felt like the Bills felt like they had to go cornerback year 1 in that draft class, and it just didn't work out for them.
The funny thing too about Elam is like when he has played, I don't know, like I don't think it's been as bad as some people have said. And so then it gets you wondering like, okay, if he's not a fit in the scheme, I get that, but how are you going to get him to be a fit in the scheme? Like,
Right.
I don't think you get better by not playing. And I don't know what that looks like. This season specifically, I think you could talk me into for Rasul Douglas, who got injured last season late in the year and ended up playing hurt in the Kansas City game, which affected that game. I know there was no Bernard, there's no Milano, there's a lot of pieces missing, but an injured Rasul Douglas probably affected the game in that game. Why not give Kaiir Elam some rotational work during the season? And I just don't know how you can get better if you get to the start of the season every year and you basically tell the guy, go sit over there until we need you to come in and play. And then it's like, it's a scramble every single time. So I don't know, like we don't know the whole story. There's got to be more behind the scenes because I do feel like Sean does a good job at empowering guys and putting guys in a position to be successful. I do know though, like I shouldn't say I do know. One question I do have, which we would probably never get a straight up answer to, is like maybe Elam was never a McDermott guy. Like maybe, Brandon Beam kind of mentioned the fact that he heard the noise. You talked about it, about the like drafting a cornerback that year. And maybe there was a disagreement on whether or not that was the way the Bills should go at that spot. And you think about where they've gone in the first round over the last 4 or 5 years since Josh Allen. Ed Oliver, I think he was really good last year. We could have that conversation on the second half of the show. But like, it's been a lot of coming up with puzzling pieces in the first round over the last couple of seasons. Even Rousseau, for as good as he's been this year, in big games against good teams with good tackles, I still think you're wanting more from him.
Yeah, no, 100%. And real quick, I had a brain fart when I was going over those cornerbacks, and I said Roby Coleman, who was way before the McDermott tenure. It was Levi Wallace I was thinking of. But, Elam, it's weird because we both, or at least I shouldn't speak for you. I thought maybe it was a John Butler thing. Butler's a phenomenal coach, did a great job in Buffalo. It just almost felt like the two of them maybe butted heads. Elam had, the way he wasn't getting on the field, wasn't playing, and you saw this fresh start with a Dye coming in, and the way that he was coaching him up all summer at training camp, and strongest camp he had. But you obviously understood Benford and Rasul Douglas starting for this team. They were the two guys that, you traded for Douglas last year. Benford had earned a role already, but you had high expectations for Kaiir Elam in terms of rotation, maybe coming in from time to time. Being that next man up in case of an injury. And then all of a sudden you see it's Jamarcus Ingram, and the special teams part that we've already talked about certainly factors into it. But the fact that there just has not been that growth, that opportunity, it is a little bit baffling because you're right. Those times that he has been on the field, for all of the frustrating penalties, the grabs, that London game where he really got picked on, he's also had some brilliant moments, some interceptions, some great plays. The one in the end zone against the Chiefs, a few interceptions against the Miami Dolphins in his career. The talent is there. It just seems like that fit is not.
Thank you so much for watching here on this Wednesday at 3:30. He's Ryan. I'm Matt. Hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel as well. We got a super chat here from Mark. We will get to that in a few minutes. Last thought on this whole Elam situation. Sean McDermott was asked what he's liked about Jamarcus Ingram. And I think if you were to extrapolate from his answer there to try to come up with a reason why he's playing over Elam, or was at least the last 3 weeks, he mentioned the big time playmaking that you saw early in the season when he kind of played in that third safety role. Mm-hmm. But then also he's a willing tackler, right? He's a productive tackler. And that's something that Sean McDermott, no matter what, has always valued. And listen, I think it's a little unfair. I think Kaiir Elam's the strength of his game is the speed, the coverage ability. Like there's a lot of really, really good corners in this league, super fast guys that, I can't speak for all of them. I haven't grinded the tape on all of them, but I think you could probably make an argument. Even like Sauce Gardner is a great example. Great cover guy. Will lock you up. He's not a good tackler. And this year it's being shown more than ever. And if Elam is more in that bucket, then to me it's organizationally unsound to draft a player like that and then set him up basically to fail. Like if that's not going to fit into your scheme, you can't panic. Now, every draft's not going to be perfect. There's a lot of moving parts. We've talked about it. We thought that they looked kind of like Trent McDuffie in that draft. They didn't get their guy, and I get it. You have to pivot. You have to make a choice. I think the biggest thing to take away from that draft that we talked about, you can't react in the moment to the detriment of your long-term plan or your long-term identity, because then you end up with a Boogie Basham, a Kaiir Elam, all of these guys that it felt like, you were making a pick because you liked the player, but it didn't necessarily fit into what you wanted to do, or you didn't have the right plan to execute with the player.
Right. And, Basham is the example that was a double dip at the position. And there's been multiple conversations about who they could have drafted over him, the Creed Humphrey draft, obviously. It does seem like for all the hits that Brandon Beane has had, and he's had plenty, a lot of guys in those middle rounds, late rounds too, some guys early on. There's been a few now where you kind of scratch your head on the Kaiir Elams, and the Basham's a great example of a day 2 pick where it just didn't pan out. And no GM is going to be perfect, have a perfect track record. That's part of this whole thing. It's a crapshoot. But when it came to Kaiir Elam, it does feel like the Bills, that was the one year where it truly felt like they had to go. They felt like they had to go that position route. It was the one thing they didn't address in free agency. And obviously you can look at the Josh Allen draft too, and knowing that they're going to go quarterback there. But for the most part, Brandon Beane and the Bills, they address their needs leading up to the draft. So that way it is generally best player available, which is a good way of doing things. This one just didn't work out. And I do see here in the comments from Adrian, could it be that he's just not coachable? I don't feel that way at all. The way that I saw him interacting this summer with the coaching staff, with the new, secondary coach, he was very coachable. He was receptive. He was listening. Adai was down there pre-snap talking with him, and you could see that he was really, really happy with the progress that Elam was showing. So no, I don't feel like he's not coachable thing. But we're not there every moment of every day. So it does certainly feel like there's something else going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, right? Like one of the first comments was his famous quote when he was drafted was "put the playbook on the plane." Like he was ready to kind of dive into everything, and it just seemed like the picture that was painted was one of a very coachable player. But obviously, he didn't connect with John Butler for whatever reason. We talked about that. And by the way, side note, shout out to John Butler, the new defensive coordinator of the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Pretty cool deal for him. There's a lot that goes into why this doesn't work. The thing to me that like I keep coming back to on the organizational side is just like how there's never been you look at all of the first round picks that the Bills have brought in, Ed Oliver. And I know he didn't kind of start right away, but he had a considerable role by the end of his first season. Greg Rousseau was starting from the beginning. Tremaine Edmonds and Josh Allen were starting from the beginning, basically. Allen in the second game. You look at 22, Dalton Kincaid, Elam, who was 21 actually. Oh, there was no first round pick that year. Right? That was the Stephon Diggs era. So, I just think you look across the board, Elam is this outlier of how now part of it is they've had better options, right? Like almost the majority of the time. And I get that piece of it. But let's not sit here and act like Rasul Douglas is producing at the level that he was a year ago. I mean, this is a guy that came in off the Green Bay Packers roster, had 9 pass breakups and 4 interceptions in 12 games. He was excellent. This year, he's got 3 pass breakups and he's got 0 interceptions. His Pro Football Focus grade of amongst players with at least 200 snaps this season, he ranks as the 49th best cornerback in the NFL. So Rasul Douglas hasn't been lighting the world on fire like he did a year ago. And I think also, if you're looking at the long term, viability here. Cornerback might be a sneaky position that they have to address this offseason, because I don't know if they even bring back Douglas unless it's on a deal that you really feel comfortable and you can stomach. But I just don't think that Douglas has played good enough to where entertaining the idea of some Elam to just get some more tape on him. Like Cody Ford, I see this in the comments here. I see his name brought up. Cody Ford has had more of an opportunity in this organization to play than Kaiir Elam. That's wild to me.
Pretty baffling, pretty wild. And again, if you're inactive, you're not playing. But think about how many games there have been this season where they really could have given him multiple reps in fourth quarters of games because of blowouts or simply, or they're on the other side too. That the Ravens game comes to mind for the negative side of that, but there have been chances to give him multiple reps in a game, and he did play in a few of them, I believe. I'd have to look at the snap counts and all that, but the opportunities just aren't enough, and you're not necessarily going to get better if you're just getting, practice reps. You need to get live game action reps, and it just hasn't occurred for him. I don't think that the door is closed on Elam in terms of his NFL career. I think he can find a system and a fit somewhere in this league when they do part ways. It just didn't work here. And that's not the only position where this happens. I see in the comments, Poona Ford's having a great year this year. He had a great year before he joined the Bills. The Tim Settles of the world working out in with the Commanders before joining the Bills. He hasn't lit the world on fire with the Texans, but it's just funny how guys can go places, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. This just seems like one of those relationships where it's just never going to work.
Final thought on this. I'm not suggesting the Bills make any aggressive move right now to move on from Kaiir Elam. I just more wanted to have the conversation about, is this now something that just better off to trade him for whatever you can get in the offseason? It's clearly doesn't seem to be a fit. Or is it one of those kinds of situations where maybe there does pop up an opportunity where he does have to go in and play? Listen, the Bills don't have great depth at boundary corner. No. If Douglas can't play this weekend and Ingram does indeed start, he's one injury away from having to go in and play. And then you're looking at like the likes of Cam Lewis, and then not a lot of depth on the boundary out there. I mean, we could be a week away from them calling back Josh Norman to see if he wants to come off the couch. So there's some issues with their depth here. I'm not suggesting that Elam isn't in the plans at any point this season. It's more of a off-season question.
Man, don't put Josh Norman into the universe like that. We do have two super chats. One is based on Elam that we can bring up here.
Let's start with Mark. Yeah, let's start with Mr. Boom Boom himself. Boom. Matt and Ryan sneaking this in at work. Mark, watch and shout at work. That is called dedication and determination, my friend. We appreciate you. Mark's a Shout Buffalo Bills insider. Do you think McDermott and Babbage will now rotate Dorian Williams in since Milano is looking a little rusty? Definitively no. That's my answer on it. I'll let Ryan answer it in a second. Hearing him talk about Milano a little bit yesterday, or Babbage 2 days ago, I get the sense that they're kind of in this to let him work through the rust that they expected him to have. And part of the problem with that in the interim is you have a couple of elite level teams. I mean, the Rams, when they're right and they're healthy, they're in that elite tier, or at least knocking on the door. Detroit's about as good as it gets. And I think like Matt Milano needs these reps against these good teams. I mean, these reps are going to, I think, get him ready for the playoffs, because you have 3 weeks against ho-hum offenses. And listen, the Jets looked a little bit better last week, and maybe they'll be playing to try to spoil something for the Bills. I don't know what that ends up being, maybe knocking them to the 3rd seed or something like that in week 17. But I still think that what you have in Dorian Williams. If he's got to go back and play, fine. I know this is going to sound crazy. I don't think that as poorly at times as Milano has played since he's been back, I don't think it's this dramatic drop off that I think some fans are acting like it is. There's a lot of fans that had issues with Dorian even when he was playing well. And listen, they had a good run of games, but like, let's talk about some of the offenses they were playing. I mean, since they've gone back, they've gone against Brock Purdy and the 49ers since Milano's been back, and then Matt Stafford playing about as good of a game as you can play in the NFL. Like, I don't think if Dorian Williams is necessarily in the lineup, that changes a whole lot of the math in how that game goes. Maybe you have a different opinion.
Well, I don't expect or anticipate them to work Dorian Williams in. I would like to see that. Give Milano 2 series, put Dorian Williams out there for 1. give him a breather, let him play the majority of the reps, but not, all of the reps or the vast majority of the reps. It did bother me a little bit to see Dorian Williams had 0 defensive snaps and only special team snaps last week. But to your point, this is the long game. You feel like if you give Milano extensive reps the rest of this year, going, the 2 weeks that you already mentioned, the Lions game, 2 games against the Patriots and the Jets, you're hoping that he is then up to speed for the matchup against whoever the Bills play on wild card weekend, unless some miracle occurs and they claim the 1 seed. And that way he's, looking more like the player he was in those meaningful win or go home games.
I'm looking at his stats here, and he's been pretty solid. I mean, he played. What we got here 543 snaps before he went out. Obviously, we talked about his tackle count over the course of our shows, and if you look at his missed tackles, he never had more than 3 in a game, which was his season high against the New York Jets in that 23-20 game. And he had a bunch of games with no missed tackles, 9 for the season. That's not terrible. I think where you get a better player in Milano, maybe even not at what he was before the injury, is his instincts in coverage. Yeah. And that's where I think that they're banking on it, knowing the kind of gauntlet that you have to go through in the AFC to get to the championship game. It's great in the run game to have Dorian Williams flying around out there, and maybe they can introduce some 4-3 to get him into the mix a little bit and take some of the, I don't want to say pressure, but like the workload off of Taron Johnson. Like a healthy, fresh Taron Johnson for the playoffs, that's something that they don't always get to have because of how many snaps he plays. Maybe just a little bit of an ideology shift, especially in a week like this, where you got to get into those running lanes and you got to shoot some gaps and really put David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs in a bad spot, which I felt like last week. Who did the Lions play last week?
Green Bay. Thursday
night. They did a good job of that, especially defensive tackles. Little side note on the defensive tackles. I saw Sean McDermott talking to Ilianku for a few minutes after practice today. It would not surprise me if that's an elevation as a response to how the Bills played defensively last week.
Yeah, Ilianku is a player that, like, realistically probably deserves a spot on the roster. It's just that they went out and they added Jefferson and Phillips after the trade deadline, after both had been let go by their respective teams. It felt like it was trending toward Anku claiming one of those spots, and then the Bills went outside and brought in some veterans who are familiar with the system. But going back and watching that game against the Rams, the D tackle position for most of the game was just getting blown off the ball, and it's worrisome. That is a position that also, we were talking about outside cornerback needing to be addressed in the draft. You definitely need to address the interior of that line, possibly edge rusher as well. The offense is humming along, and you want to address some areas there, I'm sure, in the middle rounds. But the defense is by far, some of those positions are much bigger needs than anything else right now.
Is your cat, Reggie, like snuggled around your microphone?
No, I think it's my chair hitting the table. It's been squeaking, so I'm trying to sit up a little bit.
It's a horrible user experience on this end of things. So why don't you sit up?
Apologies,
Talbot.
My apologies.
Just kidding. I'm just busting your chops. Thomas Falzone with another super chat. Thank you so much for watching on YouTube, everybody. Hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps us out. The team hasn't found a reliable number 2 CB for years, and for all his faults, Kaiir Elam makes plays and gets turnovers, which are supposed to be paramount to a Babbage defense. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to try to do more due diligence. Like I mentioned, Kaiir Elam was sitting like 45 minutes after practice today working with Christian Benford on just breaks and like everything like that. Maybe he will play this week, and maybe all of this talk and Sean McDermott maybe using some of the commentary this week to motivate Kaiir Elam. But I'm in line with Thomas. Like I do think that when he has gotten a chance to go out there, he does have kind of a knack for making plays. There might be also a knack to be out of position at times, maybe not really truly being a fit in the zone scheme when they need to play some zone heavy. But this Bills defense under Babbage has played more man defense this year than they have in years past. And you'd think that would be more of a, check mark for Kaiir Elam.
Yeah, benefit to get him out there on the field or have him at least on the game day roster. Yeah, I get they've been healthy, but, last week there were opportunities to get him on the field. You could have made the elevation of Lewis Seen. You could have had him be inactive, give him that game day check, but play Elam in that situation or have him available to play, because, who knows what he could have done in that defense at given times. They were great. The Rams are outstanding. Matthew Stafford was as accurate can be. The few times that he had incomplete passes, it was Benford just draped all over, or a few just kind of inaccurate lower passes. But for the most part, he was putting those passes in a spot where only his guys could go and get it. So, it's tough to look back and say that Elam would have made a huge difference in that game, but clearly the Bills were struggling. It was Rasul Douglas's worst game of the season, or as a member of the Bills as a whole. It felt like that would have been a prime opportunity to at least get him some reps.
So a couple questions in here about Rasul and his status for Sunday. He's not been ruled out. He didn't practice today, but it was only a walkthrough. So we'll get a better idea of where he's at. If he's limited, full tomorrow would probably mean he's going to play, but we don't know about the status. So that kind of brings up the depth at the position, who's going to end up playing. Sean McDermott said, we'll see. When asked about Ingram and Elam, it's going to probably be something they play out over the course of the week. Then another injury is Taylor Rapp, who's dealing with that nagging neck injury that's popped up. Could open up an opportunity on the road against the best offense in the NFL for rookie Cole Bishop.
And listen, Cole Bishop learned a very valuable lesson when he was on the field against the Texans weeks ago, giving up the big play, the miscommunication. You hope that was something where he's learned from it. He's grown from it, even just the time since then, getting more familiar with the playbook, his role, his responsibilities. It wouldn't happen again, but that is a dangerous potential game for him to have to play some significant reps with the way that the Detroit Lions can throw that ball around, the weapons that they have in the passing game. And part of me, though, would be intrigued about it. I want to see Cole Bishop out there on the field. I loved that pick at the time when the Bills made it. He was one of my favorite safeties in the draft class. Eventually, you got to give him those reps and those opportunities. Maybe it doesn't come this year, but if it does happen against Detroit, I'm excited. But, man, if I'm a Bills fan, I'm also a little bit worried.
Ryan, this is the best time of the season to join the Shout Buffalo Bills Insider text line, and here's why. This Friday night, we are doing, I think, our third Insider Zoom happy hour. And what that means is if you're an insider, on Friday at 6 p.m., we are all going to get together and we are going to just have a Bills conversation for an hour. Off the record, not like, a podcast or anything like that. We're just going to talk Bills. Anybody can ask questions, give their takes. Join the community that we've kind of built here. It's a really cool thing. Actually, somebody suggests that we make like a little guillotine league, fantasy league for the insiders next year as a way for them to connect as well, which is a cool idea. We'll probably do that. If you want to become an insider and test it out, you get a 2-week free trial. It's $3.99 a month after that. And you're going to want to be locked in there for the stretch run here. And obviously, once the season ends, we turn the attention to the draft, free agency, everything like that. There's never an off season for the Shout text line. 716-528-6727. Text that number or go to joinsubtext.com/shoutbuffalobills. Put in your info, get that 2-week free trial, and you're good to go. Text line's brought to you by Carrie C. Beyer, attorney with the law offices of Francis M. Leitra, located at 237 Main Street in Buffalo, New York. If you or someone you know is seriously injured, give them a call, 716-852-1234, or check out litrolaw.com.
Yeah, love the text line. And Hobdog, we see your comment in the chat. We would love to be able to extend that out to international fans. It's something we've brought up to the people on the subtext end of things, and I hope there's a resolution to that in the near future.
Us too. We've been really pushing for that. Right now, it's only available to people in the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. But eventually, hopefully, we'll open that up to everybody. That'll be great. Another question about live shows this month. We're actually punting because the home schedule down the stretch isn't great. So we're actually going to do 2 Wingnut shows in January for the playoffs. So stay tuned for those details. If you're planning on coming in for the playoff games, we're going to have you covered. We'll probably do one for the wild card round if the Bills don't end up getting the number 1 seed, and then probably the next week, or we'll see how things align and who's left, and we'll play it by ear. We'll be a little bit flexible with that, but plan on definitely wild card weekend if the Bills don't get the number 1 seed.
And don't worry about us punting; it won't get blocked, Bills fans.
Wow. That sounded like a direct shot at Reed Ferguson.
No, no, just
Wow.
with the Bills in general, and that's how the game ultimately was.
Here's the
determined.
thing: if you're an insider like David, who's asking, if you're going to be in town for one of those games, let me know. Ryan won't be able to, although you'll be in for the night before the Jets game.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yep.
Ryan will be in town for the night before the Jets game. If you're in town and you want to hang out, if you're an insider, send us a text message. We'll come out and have a beer with you at Wingnuts. How's that sound? Sound good?
I love it.
All right, cool. All right, let's get to some more updates here. We talked about the people that aren't practicing. Let's talk about the two guys that are returning to practice. Keon Coleman, full today, said today that he fully expects to play on Sunday and make his return, which is massive. Dalton Kincaid as well. He was full. Expect to have their full assortment of weapons. They're fully healthy on offense for the first time in a while going into this Lions game. How do you think that works? And I just want to mention something that Josh Allen said. He was asked about Keon Coleman being out and like maybe there being some time to take to rework their chemistry and get their rapport back to where it needs to be. He says they did all that work back in training camp. Their rapport is already there. And he brought up his own experience from his rookie season when he was injured. And it gave him a period of time where he almost like avoided the rookie wall because you get a chance to kind of sit back and take a deep breath and watch for a little while. You're not in that week-to-week grind where you're preparing to play every week because you're just rehabbing the injury. And then he also got to kind of sit back and watch Amari Cooper. And so now you're almost going to get a refreshed, recharged Keon Coleman for the stretch run, which I think is a really exciting thing if you're thinking about throwing that into this offense.
And it's a huge boost for the offense to get both of these players back. Kincaid, first and foremost, he's their top tight end. He won the number one job out of camp. It kind of moved Dawson Knox to a secondary role. He adds that dimension of an extra pass catcher. I know there's the blocking aspect that you want him to improve in, but that's going to help in what could potentially be a shootout. It also helps because they've already elevated Zach Davidson 3 times. They can't do it again. They'd have to sign him to the 53-man roster if they wanted to play him. Come playoff time, they can elevate him from the practice squad in that event. But it helps from the personnel perspective, especially Quentin Moore is still, he was obviously out last week. He'll probably not be at 100%, even if he is suited up in that capacity too. And then Keon Coleman, the way that he's been able to win those jump ball situations on the outside, the yards after the catch factor, it adds that extra dimension where teams obviously try to key in on everything with this offense that they can, but the more weapons you have, the better you're going to be. And Coleman is just another weapon for Josh Allen to utilize in this matchup of what, in my opinion, I know that loss against the Rams stings a little bit for fans, but this potential matchup against the Lions, it still feels like a potential Super Bowl preview to me.
Indeed. And I think the Bills are also getting healthier in terms of the injured reserves players. You have Dwan Smoot, who practiced today, kind of talking after practice like he's going to play on Sunday. Like there's no wait and see kind of mode. So that could be a really nice charge to their run defense if he's able to get back and play. They also opened the 21-day practice window for linebacker Balin Spector. So we'll see where he's at coming back from that calf injury. I put Smoot as more likely to play this weekend. I think they've gotten a lot of Joe Andreessen in that special teams role as the depth linebacker. But for Smoot, he said he's dealt with his injury before. He's had the same wrist injury on the other wrist earlier in the season, and he's gotten used to coming back from injury after injury. It's a pain tolerance thing. Once you get out there, he said he wouldn't be practicing if he wasn't ready to play. So that could be like a big-time jolt for them as they look to kind of play some musical chairs with what they do. And then Hobdog here on YouTube says, can you see Jordan Phillips coming back? I almost wonder if Phillips didn't play last week, do they elevate Ilianku and keep Phillips inactive? How do you think that all kind of shakes out? I mean, they could bring back Phillips again and maybe keep Jefferson down this week.
Right. Well, so first of all, Smoot is going to be a big-time addition, not even just for this potential week if he does play, just down the stretch. He became their most trusted reserve DN, and we saw it at training camp. All the way back then, how much they valued him, his skill set, what he can do, the versatility to even play along across the line in a few different spots. This is going to be a big boost for a D-line that did nothing last week against the Rams down the tail run of the regular season and then potentially for the playoffs. Balin Spector, he always seems to find a way to get injured. You have Matt Milano back now, even if they do eventually bring him off and activate him off of the IR. I don't know what his role looks like beyond special teams. So you have those two things. And then the D tackle, it's interesting. Anku feels like this guy that deserves the opportunity, the elevation, especially because you're healthy now. On offense, you're not going to bring up a Davidson. You're already bringing up other guys throughout this roster. You had Mike White a few weeks ago for that game day check. Lewis Seen getting that opportunity. Anku, I'd like to see brought up not just for the game day check, but also the opportunity to actually play. He has factored in well. He's played well when given the opportunity. And no knock on Jordan Phillips, because Phillips in some of the reps he's played since coming back to Buffalo, he has made some nice plays, but there's been other times he's been pushed off the ball too. I don't know if necessarily the Bills have on their current roster the answer in terms of a guy you want to see playing meaningful reps, where I'd like to give Anku the opportunity to see what that looks like with the playoffs, looming, knowing you can elevate him as many times as you want off of the practice squad.
We could also see, and I'll be interested to ask him about it in the next couple of days. If Rapp can't play, then you're talking about Hamlin and Bishop likely with Cam Lewis as the main backup. But Cam Lewis plays the dime role. So if there's an injury in the game, they would need somebody else. That could be an opportunity for the Bills to elevate Micah Hyde. I know you talked about it a couple episodes ago about potentially just elevating him the last 3 games of the season. But maybe they might force their hand to see if he's game ready. I don't know. I mean, that's going to be pretty quick.
When an injury occurs, it was that either you bring him up the last few weeks to give him some run, or if there's an injury, and there's an injury, lo and behold. So this is an opportunity. At least have him up there. And if Cole Bishop has another one of those moments, it would be nice to just have Hyde there to kind of talk to him first and foremost, but also a trusted guy that can come in and play a few reps or a few snaps and kind of ease that transition, so to speak, from getting that young player in Bishop on the field.
Thank you so much for watching on this Wednesday here. If you're on YouTube, hit that like button. Let's get those likes up to 100 before we get out of here. Subscribe to the channel as well if you're just landing on this page. If you didn't check it out yet, I caught up with Ben Raven. He covers the Detroit Lions for MLive.com, our sister site under the Advanced umbrella. Does a great job. We talked to him yesterday, gave us that first look at the Lions. We'll be back with our preview show in a little while. Where do you want to go next, Ryan, before we get out of here?
I just like that you almost said Baltimore because the last name was Raven first and foremost. But, looking over at our subtext line here, I guess Ed Oliver's a good probably ending point.
Let's hit on that before we get out of here.
Yeah. So you want to go over to what he said today? Or
no, I was just leaving you hanging just to see if you were going to
I'll leave it in.
That air.
So,
nice.
We've talked a lot about Ed Oliver and the stats and the drop-off from last season to this season, and he kind of touched upon it today when talking about how if it were up to him, his stats would be just like they were 1 year ago. He'd be sitting at about 8.5 sacks and having those numbers. So here's what Ed Oliver has said on his season to date. I think I had 2 quarterback hits last game. I can't do nothing about the ball being out fast, and I didn't have quarterback hits right at 2 seconds. The ball is gone. I'm hitting the quarterback, and the ball is just gone. I can't do anything about that. All I can do is keep rushing. So, that's the first part of 3 quotes that you had for the Shout Insiders. And he raises a valid point. Quarterbacks get the ball out very quickly in today's NFL. And there's many times where no matter how good you are, whether you win your battle or not, the ball's out before you get back to your quarterback or the opposing quarterback.
And I do see what he's saying. And listen, Sean McDermott defended him too when asked about him today. He said, listen, it's not always about what one guy's doing when somebody's not putting up numbers. Sometimes it's about what other people aren't doing too. That's part of the mix. The one pushback I'll have on Oliver and why I think that you need more is the pressure rate is not where it was last season when he was so effective. Like, I think you could watch a lot of these games and come away from it thinking, I just didn't see Ed Oliver having an impact on this game enough. And that could be how teams are scheming against the Bills. Maybe not enough from other players. Whatever the case may be, I put this out to the insiders, and I truly do believe it. This feels like a legacy-defining playoff run for Ed Oliver, right? He goes out last year and has 9.5 sacks, puts to bed a lot of the criticism that he can't be a high-end, chaos creator as a defensive pass rusher. But now we've come to this season, and a lot of that impact has dropped off a little bit. But what did that really get you last year? It didn't get you very much, because in the biggest game, when they needed somebody to really affect Patrick Mahomes in the playoff game, everybody was pretty much a no-show. Von Miller, you can make the argument, coming back from the injury, was the most effective pass rusher in that game. Ed Oliver's got to be the 9th overall pick that they drafted him to be. He's got to show up for this playoff stretch run, and I think that is very much tied to the kind of run that the Bills can go on in the playoffs this year. I don't want to say they go as Ed Oliver goes, because they go as Josh Allen goes, for sure. But he's pretty close in level of importance, because I think if you look across that line from a game-to-game, snap-to-snap ability to impact the game, Oliver can really change the course of things with the way that he's able to change the game. And I think it's there. We've seen it in big moments, in short spurts over the course of his career, going back to his rookie season on Thanksgiving against the Dallas Cowboys. We need to see it now on the big stage. And I'm not so much worried about not having it for the regular season. If you can find a way to play your best ball in late December into the January run, I think Bills fans will take that.
100%. And one thing I'll say about Ed Oliver, I've watched a lot of the games back where I've been critical of him in the D tackle position. And one thing I'll say is he does get doubled a lot, and no one else is stepping up at the D tackle position to make his life easier. If someone were to step up, the double teams might not happen. And that's one part of it. Now, does he have to find a way to win those? Does he have to find a way to make a bigger impact like he did 1 year ago? Absolutely. He gets pushed off the ball at times. He has not been great, but this is going to be a big opportunity for him come playoff time to make that impact, where the D-line as a whole has no-showed in a lot of these playoff opportunities. They need that D-line to have some kind of impact if they want to make a deep run.
We got a bunch of people watching here, Ryan. Sometimes when we go with these earlier shows, it's always a bit of a dice roll to see if people can kind of get us right before the workday ends. But we always appreciate you making us part of your day here on Shout. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel as well if you're watching on YouTube. And also, while you're here, think about making a trip this weekend to Tops Friendly Markets, because this Sunday it's Bills versus Lions, but it's also Slider Sunday. And you can get ready for Slider Sunday your way with King's Hawaiian at Tops. Every Sunday is an opportunity to enjoy delicious sliders made your way. And now you can win big while doing it. Vote for your favorite slider weekly for a chance to win tickets to the big game. Grab your favorite King's Hawaiian products from Tops and craft the ultimate sliders to make your Sunday even more special. Visit topsmarkets.com/Slider Sundays. Final thought, Ryan Talbot.
Final thought, join us on Friday when we do our preview show. And, it's not too late to become an insider and join us even later on Friday for our live Zoom.
Ooh, that's the way to close down the show, Mr. Talbot. We'll see you Friday. Take care, everybody.